By the way, I was a huge fan of watching your match, like the no permanence into all the stuff I want was quite a nice transition.
Yeah, the Timeless Lotus deck is very swingy, but it's so fun. It's really-
So yeah, I was worried, but like in our match, but got lucky. So we got our opening hands here, right? Um, it's kind of so interestingly, there are funnily enough. BBD's on the play. There's not enough answers to both Ragavans, and I wonder if we're going to see subtlety turn one, just because Ragavan is really powerful again.
Yeah, I think you could either subtlety at turn one, or maybe potentially try to subtlety a Teferi that's coming down later. Both options probably don't feel very good, but you got to do what you got to do. Ari decides to save the subtlety for later. Brian's probably sweating. Actually, I guess not sweating too much here, since the Ragavan being on the play will get you that third mana on turn three to at least have a solid plan against Living End. Although potentially Arya will evoke the grief to take the Teferi, but also only has one land. A lot of there's so much happening at once. It's hard to hard
Yeah.
to and the hands are changing by the moment.
So interestingly, you could decide not to because of the subtlety stopping Teferi, but then the Teferi goes on top, so you can't grief it. So
Mhm.
that's kind of an interesting line there about the grief. Is yes, Teferi can't come down, and I have the answer, but then wait a second, it goes top. So I do wonder here, but then there's no second land, and Street Wraith is kind of the only card that allows you to really cycle for free, and mana is like super tight here.
Mhm.
So I kind of appreciate not doing this, and I like doing the surveil land first, making sure if it was a land on top, then you can get rid of the Street Wraith, but it's not, so it's kind of a tough call.
Yeah, I think that's probably Arya's thought process here. And luckily for Arya too, Brian doesn't draw land number two. Teferi Time Raveler does not come down this turn. And then she draws a grief return, which means I think this Teferi is going to exit Brian's hand, which means that if Arya is able to cobble together two lands between this Oliphant, the Curator Cycle, and the draw step for next turn, we're likely going to see a really big Living End on turn three.
Yes, indeed. The other aspect that to me is interesting on top of this is that Oliphant was fantastic, by the way. Drawn, of course, gets you the
Mhm.
land, everything you need. It like to me the fact that you can hear grief the Teferi, get protected against that, and then on top of that you have violent outburst. So if Arya draws Force of Negation, there's really nothing that BBD can even top deck to get out of the situation.
That is exactly true. This is of course why Living End is so potent. You can just have your hate card that you're accelerating into off Ragavan, and it just doesn't matter sometimes. Although Arya chose to not go for grief here, I guess thinking that she can just use subtlety to answer Teferi if she needs to. But like you said, that only answers Teferi for one turn and not grief it once it's on top of the deck.
So on the previous turn, I did wonder about it. This turn, I think it's correct not to, because the line is essentially there's also counterspell in the deck, and being able to take counterspell is pretty important. But this is going to be really bad news because you essentially have the subtlety, and Arya doesn't have land number free. I mean, doesn't even have green mana actually.
Mhm.
So there's only a very small percentage of draws here that can get Arya to cast Violent Outburst next turn.
Yeah.
I guess you could technically redraw if a subtlety comes off the top or a Force of Negation. You do get breathing room, so there are actually a little bit more outs, right? You got the green lands, but you also have Force of Negation and subtlety as potential outs, and you can cite, you can search with that Waker of Waves the next two cards.
Yeah, that's right. Kind of interesting the decision to not attack first with Ragavan. I guess there's basically nothing that she can hit, but I guess not that interesting after all, actually.
Ooh, get that Force of Negation. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that is super relevant to clear the force of negation from the top. Um Arya's draw step return is a green force.
Oh,
So
that is so good. That Misty Rainforest off the top.
yeah.
Uh, exactly. You get the grief here. Just put it in the yard. Take away BBD's two best cards. And then what are we getting back? Oh, we're done.
Yeah.
BBD
This
isn't playing Supreme Verdict, so
yeah, no, this is game over here. May take a little minute to resolve the grief and the fetch land, but I think I expect Brian to concede to the violent outburst.
one thing I am interested in BBD's deck is I wonder about the decision not to have Force of Negation. I was wondering, it's a callback to Force of Will. But there's just not enough blue cards, I think, in the deck. Like, you see that hand with...
No, there's enough blue cards. There's like 20 plus, but the problem is Force of Negation is just not a very good tool in Modern right now in your fair interactive decks. Like it's surprisingly not a very good tool against the Violent Outburst decks where they beat your Force of Negations by comboing on your turn, and it doesn't line up well against a lot of the other decks in the format. I think Force of Negation right now in Modern is almost exclusively a combo card to protect your own combo.
Which is kind of messed up when you think about the fact that it has the text.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't do this on your own turn. Like, it's kind of like, wait, so I get to win the turn on your turn?
Yeah.
On your turn?
Yeah, it's certainly intended so that your so that your combos are not being able to be protected by your Force of Negation, but it kind of has had the inverse effect where Force of Negation just doesn't stop the instant speed combos.
Yeah, no. And then here we see the usual Violent Outburst
Mm-hmm.
into Living End and all the Yada stuff. This is online. This is so dramatic, by the way. Like, I'm used to paper. And I mean, it's dramatic in its own way, but usually what happens is you don't even put the cards in play. You kind of like pick up your permanents, so it's not as dramatic. But online, like, wow, all these little rectangles that appear.
Brian's still in this game, going to take that draw step, see if Terminus snuck its way into the deck list. It did not, conceding or off the sideboarding.
Yeah.
One very interesting thing about Brian's deck list is that he's kind of attacking Arya from every angle here. We have one Dovin's Veto, one Chalice of the Void, one Unlicensed Curse. We also have a Blood Moon and a Magus of the Moon. Are those going to come in? There's subtlety as well to think about. Like, and then when you're boarding as Living End, having to answer artifacts and counterspells can be a little bit tricky. And I'm very interested to see exactly what she drags in over here.
I see the free borrowers, and that kind of makes sense. So I think in the kind of almost pre-show, so to speak, you were talking. I think BBD was talking about broad answers. Brazen Borrower is really that, right? It's okay. You have one of everything. Fine. I got these free borrowers. They'll deal with this one of everything, and then you also have incubation and congruity to search up Brazen Borrower. Mm-hmm. So those free copies actually start being... yeah, and that's the thing, right? Arya's like cutting one and then like, wait a second, I kind of need this. Because if you don't have the Foundation Breakers, if you don't have, Force of Vigor coming in, if you're relying on this Brazen Borrower, I don't think you can really afford to cut more. And on BBD's side, we actually just see one extra subtlety, I think. Obviously, get rid of those 4 prismatic endings, which, while they are exceptional against your deck, Spike, they were pretty poor against everybody else.
Yeah, it was a bad day to register this deck versus the double prismatic ending pod.
Yeah, no way to know though. That's just
opening hands, game 2. Brian, I think, has a pretty clear mulligan, Sacred Foundry Preordain, not going to get done.
Look at that one of right there. Bam.
Yeah, although another hand with Brian's only 2 lands in his decks that don't tap for blue, Uncastle Preordains, and actually decides to mulligan the Chalice of the Void there. And his 5-card hand looks great.
Yeah, and it's a good thing to have mulligan that, right? Because we can see that Force of Negation in hand, and that would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty easy bottom, by the way. Lightning Bolt is one of the worst. Like, you have them left, but they're pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the second Teferi.
Yeah, Ragavan, definitely the most important card to have in your opening hand in this matchup. Ragavan, these days it gets removed super easy. It gets blocked super easily. It's not quite the potent threat that it was at the very beginning of Modern Horizons 2. But there are like 2 matchups where it really shines. It's this one and against Tron usually.
Yeah. But by the way, no cycling of the Street Wraith. Arya's made kind of, I think, the choice of, I'm not going to subtlety this Ragavan anyway, so no need to cycle it. Could draw Grief. It is the only black card in hand, so I think heads up about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Living in is such a complicated deck to like figure out your sequencing, and there's almost always a reason to do something and to not do something, and it can be kind of marginal. Like, you could have cycled Street Wraith here to have blue mana to Curator turn 1, and potentially that could be relevant. It's just so many branching decision trees.
But by the way, one of the problems with Teferi Time Raveler, you're kind of seeing with these hands is You know, when it's a little bit like the deck I played, you have Griefs and stuff, so Teferi is a lot more potent. But the problem I've had playing, say, 4-color Soups in the past is Teferi just walks into Force of Negation, Mystical Dispute, and Subtlety. And that's a really rough trio to try to resolve Teferi, especially when they're paying 0 mana, so they can just like pitch a bunch of cards. And Living End doesn't need many cards, right? If okay, you got my Subtlety, it's in the graveyard. Okay, I can force back with your counter spell. Your Teferi's not there, and then I'll do it. And okay, well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we may even see Arya take the counter spell and leave the Teferi because it just plays into her hand so much better.
Yeah, I do wonder here. The counter spell is like the obvious pick, but you have Mystical Dispute and also a lot of lands plus Force of Negation. If you knew you had Violent Outburst, I think this is easy. Like, you can kind of decide a bit more. Because I was looking at that Caldra complete. But no white mana. If there was white mana, it'd be a consideration. But I think because we don't have yet the Cascade spell in hand. But yeah, without the white mana access here, it is a lot more interesting to take the counter spell. But yeah,
Wow,
see,
that's what she
yeah,
takes. Very cool.
yep. You know, what's the pressure here? We're taking free a turn. We got some time.
Yeah, no, I think the logic makes a lot of sense. It was like certainly like completely against my instincts there, but thinking about it a little more, listening to you talk at the line, yeah, I think it makes some sense.
Now, all that said, BBD should not be casting Fairy. There's one very clear blue mana. And you rather have counterspell backup, I think, here. Plus, if you cast the fairy, it gets countered, then you get Shardless Agent. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I think it's just such a big tell that Arya took your Cauldron Complete. You can know pretty confidently that your Teferi is not going to resolve. But if you just wait a turn, you can play Teferi with Counterspell up potentially. Arya notably gets Hedge Mage with her Generous Ent, and then draws Waker of Waves for turn. So a lot of digging for a possible Cascade spell next turn. It looks like there's a Curator of Mysteries binned off the Hedge Mage there. Graveyard looking very stacked. If a Living End resolves this game, it's going to be completely over for Brian. But Teferi Time Raveler with Counterspell up, I guess is not actually not even going to get the job done.
It depends on what gets drawn. If it's Shardless Agent, no, actually, no, you're right. Because you only have counterspell. So actually, no, with 3 mana up, you can just play counterspell and pay.
Well, I think what's going to happen is that Brian is going to cast the Teferi, and then Arya is going to force a negation because there's 3 mana to pay for dispute, and then it's just so juicy to force the counterspell this force negation. Arya only has 3 cards in hand. If it seems very hard to not fire it off here.
Yeah, I agree. It's so tempting. I mean, and to be fair, at least this is taking Arya's mana. And lost the Waker of Waves over the Curator of Mysteries. That's also kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it's so she can draw. Well, so she can dispute and then cycle Curator for 1 and get 2 looks at a 3 mana Cascade spell next turn.
Yeah, right. You have 4 mana, so you do that. But the thing is, this is it is close to BBD's last card, so that was the consideration. So here we go. We get a cycle. If this is Violent Outburst or Shardless Agent, that's all they wrote. Or are we getting a 4/4? There's no pressure, to be fair.
4/4. Wow, you could just cast spells. You just pay their mana cost.
So a funny story from the Canada RC is the winner was Living End, but he only played 14 actual lands in the deck, but there were only 4 Misty Rainforest as fetch lands. So the deck actually had access to up to 10 lands that could be in play. So often against the control decks, you just like get to land 6, 7, 8, and be able to hard cast. Oliphant and Generous Ent helped this plan a lot better. Oh, what a draw from BB. Oh, that's beautiful. Not gonna attack. I just like Snapcaster.
Yeah. Very Snapcaster's beautiful card, and it's nice to have some insurance against a top deck Cascade spell that, despite having Force of Negation, doesn't have the blue card to pitch anymore on Arya's side. Surveil Land's super relevant this whole match too. It's hard to like understate like just how nice it is for Brian to be able to dig a little bit deeper to get out from behind this Curator.
I think Arya has access to 2, if I'm not mistaken. I've seen lists in Living End from 1 to 3. I think 1 is not great. I'd like at least 2.
Yeah.
And I've seen free with the red-green one just because it can be searched by both of the land searchers. But the thing is that these spell lands are so good in Living End where like, oh, I'll just bin this creature. It's just there we go. There's the Cascade spell. I think it makes sense to wait here.
Yeah, I think so too. I would probably upkeep it. Like we saw Brian surveil a card into the yard tapped, and then has had 2 draws here. A lot of dead draws Brian could have had, and I think it's just okay to jam in the upkeep. And then if Brian does have a counter spell, maybe you tap him too low and he can't play a second one. I think Brian should probably snap counterspell the Living Ends, since this is like a much clunkier card than Dovin's Veto.
I do agree. I do wonder about deciding to firing off the Violent Outburst here. The reason is, what are you worried about waiting an extra turn? You'll either draw a land, and then you have the mana for Force of Negation. You'll draw a blue card, and then you have Force of Negation. Not like Brian's putting any pressure or can deal with this creative mysteries in an easy way.
I think that's a good argument, yeah.
And like, look, now, I mean, to be fair, Dovin's Veto you were never fighting over, but the logic with this line is I can draw another Cascader next turn and I can play it. That's the biggest argument there, and it's a totally reasonable one. I think the reason Brian put the veto is because now you have Snapcaster Veto.
That's fair, yeah. You can also play around Mystical Dispute a little bit by using Dovin's Veto.
Yes. Well, kind of, right? Because you get Dispute on Mage, but still here. Yeah, this this is why you remember that lightning bolt we had to bottom? It'd be really good here.
Yeah, that is definitely true.
I mean, it'd be game over pretty much. Well, I mean, you'd have to force the bolt, which is not optimal. Brazen Borrower.
Yeah, might allow Arya to start attacking. Probably just with the 3/1, not with the Curator quite yet.
So we could see a really I mean, this would be super risky from Brian, but like, Brazen Borrow subtlety it. That's risky. I don't think putting the free body is correct. Petty Theft. That's interesting.
Wait, is she casting Petty Theft? It looks like on my screen she's just.
I saw her hover over it. Yeah.
Oh, no, you're right. I guess if you just don't want to cast the Borrower this turn, you want to keep up Force of Negation. This is probably the line you want to take.
I think it's reasonable here to just cast the Borrower.
Just casting both. Okay.
No, there's nothing that PPD can really do that's worrisome. This allows to put some pressure because that Creative Mysteries really couldn't attack. Let's be honest, it did have Defender pretty much. Oh, another one.
Yeah, that's kind of the nuts, although it does play really hard into Brian's subtlety. Be pretty interesting if she cycles it or casts it. You do get the extra Scry 1 because there's a Curator of Mysteries already in play. I think it's kind of hard to resist just casting it on this board.
I do agree with you, but if there's less removal, I do wonder about it because you get to keep Force of Negation up, and the second 4/4 doesn't really do that much for you.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that basically because the subtlety is essentially trading for Brazen Borrower. This 4/4 kind of has to have Defender just because of Ragavan and the threat of Ragavan. So you get to keep Force of Negation because, like, I'm looking at this. I mean, now if it's a fairy game, it's not. I mean, the biggest lock, but it could be problematic, right? You bounce the Curator and then dash Ragavan or something, and then that's problematic because then you have a subtlety to block the Borrower. So, that sequence could have been really dangerous. I don't think it'll play out that way, but that was a big risk with the cast there for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Very easy with perfect information to say as well.
Yeah, right. You might also not think so hard about subtlety because there's very few in the deck. Because subtlety in a brief is nice, but like subtlety on subtlety is not that common. So as a result, there is a question: how many subtleties are there even? And oh wow, lovers of old school modern.
Yeah, Snap Counterspell 4-drop.
Well, Snap Counterspell is kind of like legacy play more, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's an amazing card, but I love this. I love this game. So the best living end games from a viewing perspective are definitely these. The ones where living end is definitely in it, but you're not quite sure what you need to do as the living end. Like there's a game plan to be progressed on both sides, and it's not 100% who's actually going to take it down. I love these. These games are the best with living end. Like look at this. There's been no big pieces apart from like a Teferi that got disrupted. Everything else been like pretty much spells on the stack and creatures in play. Ooh.
Yeah, I agree. The games against living end are, I think, a lot more interesting than people tend to give them credit for.
Oh, this Teferi is huge. You get to bounce the Curator. You get to attack in with with the ground creatures. That gets you a treasure for counterspell. Oh, this is so good.
Yeah, you even just get to attack with everything here. Because it forces a block.
Oh yeah, at 8. You're right. Good spot. Good spot. Yeah, this is a forced block, so you even get rid of the borrow from the table. Yeah. No, this is big. I actually don't see how Arya comes back from this one.
Probably if you cycle into second borrower and then draw a cascade spell for turn, that probably gets the job done.
Yeah, but we have the treasure from Ragavan.
Oh, right. Then no, game should be over.
Oh no, wait. We have. Sorry, I'm wrong. We have 6 mana, so we have to literally because there's a fairy in play. Like there's nothing.
Yeah. It should be. No. Should be GG. Go to game 3.
Oh yeah. Game 3 great though.
Yeah, Arya gets to be on the play for the first time this match. Always a refreshing thing to do.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be on the play. And even and I mean that's why I ran Gemstone Caverns, right? Got to make sure you're on the play every time.
Yeah, of course.
Have you while we wait, have you seen that, by the way? I've done it once. The Gemstone Caverns Leyline of the Guild Pack plus Leyline Binding. It was delicious.
I don't think I've ever seen all 3 of those cards happen on turn 0 before, but that does sound very delicious.
Yeah, it's for chat to have something to aspire to. But yeah, here this has been a really interesting match. I really like the back and forth between both players, especially because it's both stack based and board based.
I agree. Looks like Brian has just a snap keep here.
Yeah.
And Arya's hand is
fantastic.
Incredible.
It actually lacks cyclers, which is not the most common thing to lack.
Yeah, the surveillance do help a little bit with these kind of hands. You at least have the one of Curator, but surveillance allowing you to dig for that just creatures in the yard, even if they're not future cyclers, is so nice.
Yep. I mean, you don't need much, right? I think like two or free creatures is almost enough if you RAF BBD's board plus you have to put, even if it's like Curator and Grief, honestly, it's probably good enough.
Yeah, we saw the Curator last game just almost it'd be so difficult for Brian's like 3 creatures to get through.
Yeah, it's like 4/4 air elemental. Nah, I'm out. Just can't. Well, we got answers for days, that's for sure.
Yeah, maybe too many Brazen Borrowers this time around.
Well, drew all 3. That is actually pretty unfortunate. I mean, we're looking at all 3 out of 10 cards.
Yeah.
And this Ragavan, honestly, I would be quite tempted to petty theft this, but I can understand why not to do it. I mean, it's such a cheap creature, and you do want to like make sure you have something. But it is a close call, honestly. I would take honestly. That's the type of thing. If you're like interested in Modern, for these situations, I like to like look at a screenshot and then like I don't know what the answer is, but I'll look at it later. I'll analyze this later.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about it. I agree that it's super close. I think Surveil Land here seems incredibly valuable to me. Trying to like both find a land and put a creature in the graveyard. The Surveil Land has the opportunity to do that. I think that's probably where I would lean towards, but I agree. It's always I always feel like I'm itching to petty theft or Ragavan.
Yeah, because the problem here, like the Surveil Land is very valuable, but the issue with it is you can't like just the land hitting the land is not enough because A, you have Shardless Agents, so you're forcing negations out there. You need probably 2 lands to be realistic, and B, that graveyard has had one creature. Now it has two. That is the argument for the Surveil land, right? It's look, we're gonna have to take this one a little slower, and you know, if you Brazen Borrower now, you still have Force of Negation, you still have Mystical Dispute. This isn't too bad. You don't have to dispute something. It's all good. You get another Surveil land.
Yeah, Surveil lands are so busted.
Yeah, no. I mean, the fact you can tutor, it's fetch plus Surveil land. Like,
yeah, of course.
I don't think these lands are gonna break anything. Well, I mean, in Pioneer, the deck you previewed today with the enhanced surveillance, people were excited to see if that was a Pioneer thing. But yeah, like temples were decent in standard, but they're not like, unless there's like a graveyard piece of synergy, they're not going to do that much more. Whereas in modern, being able to tutor a spell with your mana base is frankly unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Dried Arbor has seen play for so many years.
And if Arya could just surveil an untapped land or Violent Outburst at the top, she's probably just going to win this game.
Violent Outburst especially.
Yeah. Also, it has extra Brazen Borrowers to combat the Cauldron Complete, and then decides to main phase Waker of Waves to try to maybe have Petty Theft for that token and hit a land. Instead, Wakers into Street Wraith, which cycles into a Street Wraith, which cycles
free Street Wraiths off the top. You can see the one in the graveyard.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So Arya here really wants a land, like so bad.
Because Violent Outburst is the second best thing.
Yeah, no, drawing Violent Outburst there. I mean, like that's once that Violent Outburst is drawn, the land is so valuable because now Force of Negation online, so you got one backup piece. If you get that second backup piece with Mystical Dispute, you're golden. And BBD can't really like Teferi plus play for Dispute this turn anyways because there's not enough. Although Arya would have loved that, right? Like if you're able to use that Dispute on BBD's turn, that's the best because then you get to have the mana up.
Absolutely.
Oh,
wow.
Oh yeah. Even uses the treasure. That's a pretty that's a commitment. Although I guess you have Ragavan plus Counterspell, and this is looking really good for Arya, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't imagine she ever disputes the Snapcaster. Oh wait, I guess my imagination was not powerful enough.
Or you might be about to be proven wrong. You are proven wrong.
Yeah, I feel like you just got to save this for Teferi or have the option to like draw a land and just have 2 protection spells for your Violent Outburst.
Yeah. To be fair with Teferi, there is a Sacred Foundry in play. That's one thing. So you know, double counterspell isn't a thing unless it's.
There's with Dovin's Veto, yeah.
You need Dovin's Veto specifically. There's one. The worst card would have been Chalice. That would have been a total disaster because then it's Chalice plus counterspell. I mean, you have the Brazen Borrowers, but BBD untaps gets to like stop your borrowers. That could be really risky. Here, probably what we're gonna see is.
Oh, someone in chat is pointing out the very simple addition that Arya did and I couldn't do is Snapcaster Mage plus Ragavan plus Cauldron is 9 damage, and she's at 9.
Oh, yes, that is much. Well, you would need a land, but yes, that is definitely the consideration. Yeah, that is a really good spot. I mean, there was definitely a reason for the dispute. I didn't want to. I was, so. Right, and here I think Arya is going to just clean up because we're going to see that Violent Outburst with Force of Negation backup, and BBD does not have the mana. As long as Arya upkeeps it.
I think so, yeah. I think she will.
Yeah. That graveyard is stocked enough. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it looks. Brian will get a Snapcaster Mage that has a lot of work to do.
Yep. That has a ton of work. Oh.
Right?
It's going to be a 0-1 Snapcaster Mage as well. These weaker players.
So now Brian advances to 2-1. So it'll be me and Arya facing off in match number 5, both fighting for to join you. And oh wait, hold on. So Brian joins you, or Arya already won a match? I'm getting
Arya won. This is a losers bracket. So you're facing Arya for that last spot, presuming Arya wins from this position, which I would say probably.
I guess it just in my brain I had lost to Brian in my match, but I did win, so I'm going to be facing Arya after this too for winners and losers brackets.
If I had a suggestion for your deck in the future, Bajuga Bog would be
Yeah, I played it in other Archdruid's Charms list, and I did looking at the bracket. I definitely regretted not having it today.
Yeah.